Beyond Resilience is a series of curated conversations created by Firelight.
Beyond Resilience does a lot to keep people connected and keep people talking about films or talking about issues, connecting our filmmakers and other filmmakers together.
We wanted to create a space where our community, that is BIPOC documentary filmmakers, could lead a conversation.
We have to do a better job of knowing that films aren't just what we can physically see on the screen. It's about the people that put in the blood, sweat, and tears behind the scenes.
Knowing that what you're so passionate about, someone looks at as unmarketable or niche. Who's the audience for this? Who's going to care about this, right? And those simple things that people say are like daggers to you.
I think that is the part of the violence of the model minority shit, that it like shaves away our history of resistance, of rebellion, of ferocity.
We have always resisted. We have always fought back in many different forms.
It's an evolving form. You have to evolve or not you will stagnate.
You have to have intention to change, and you have to understand not changing to try to give anybody a gift, but you're changing so that you can do your job better.
What we're asking for is just proportional access, proportional resources, proportional marketing money, so that it does actually meet its mission, so that it does actually lean into the diversity of perspectives.
I hope that Beyond Resilience will keep its edge, will keep pushing the boundaries of the conversations that we need to have, and will keep growing its audiences, pulling in new people from the industry, outside the industry. It continues to be a space where people can have a BIPOC creator-led conversation. That is what it's about.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Marcia Smith. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the co-founder and president of Firelight Media. I joined this event from Martha's Vineyard on the land of the Wampanoag people who do retain sovereignty over an important part of this island. At Firelight Media, we stand in solidarity with Indigenous people worldwide and like to remind our audience about Indigenous sovereignty and land rights. I encourage you to follow the link in the chat to learn about whose ancestral lands you are joining this event from. Also, please invite you to introduce yourself and share your own land acknowledgement in the chat if you care to. I am a Black woman with Black glasses and short natural hair and a white shirt. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to share a quick update about Firelight Media, a happy update. For those of you who are not familiar with our work, Firelight is a nonprofit organization that supports resources and advocates on behalf of filmmakers of color. Over the past year, we have been engaged in the process of updating our organizational mission, vision, and values. To inform these statements, we've surveyed and interviewed our community of fellows, alumni, industry partners, and supporters. I'm sure many of you who are with us today. We have also worked deeply on the staff and board levels to ensure that these statements align with our current work and point to the future of our work. At a time when dedicated support for Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color is under attack, we are proud to rededicate ourselves to serving filmmakers and communities of color in all of our vibrance and complexity. We invite you to review our updated mission, vision, and values via the link in the chat. And if you yourself are aligned with this mission, we invite you to support our work by sharing information about Firelight Media and our programs with members of your community. You can also support our work by making a tax-deductible donation at any time via the link in the chat or by texting Firelight to 44321. Now, for today's masterclass. This masterclass series gathers seasoned nonfiction filmmakers to share their expertise around a particular aspect of documentary filmmaking. Today, in honor of Juneteenth and Black Music Month, we are honored to bring together veteran Black filmmakers to understand how they have tackled films about iconic Black musicians. I'm very grateful today to today's panelists who you'll meet shortly. Before that, a special thank you to our ASL interpreter, Andrea Lust, to Jean-Pierre Regis, our series producer, and to Justin Sherwood, our communications director. For closed caption services, please see the lower right-hand corner of your YouTube screen. Also, a special thank you to our ongoing Beyond Resilience series supporters, including Open Society Foundations, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the National Endowment for the Arts, and Field of Vision for helping to make these conversations possible. Now, I'll pass it on to our moderator for this conversation, Leah Smith, yes, my name mate, who will then introduce the rest of our panelists. Leah Smith is a seasoned filmmaker with nearly 25 years of experience in the industry. She began her career at CNN, contributing to the launch of Anderson Cooper 360, and covering events like 9/11, little events like 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, and various presidential elections, earning 2 news Emmys for her coverage of the Haiti earthquake. In 2013, Leah received another news and documentary Emmy for her work on Kids on Race, The Hidden Picture. Transitioning to NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, Leah continued her focus on impactful storytelling. She's now deep into her 3rd collaboration with Trilogy Films under the guidance of the esteemed filmmaker and Firelight Media Doc Lab alum, Dawn Porter. Leah's latest producing credit is Luther, Never Too Much, which recently screened at the Tribeca Film Festival and was also recently acquired by CNN Films. I will pass it over to you, Leah.
Thank you so much, Marsha. Cousin Marsha made me like, I'm so honored to be here with all these beyond esteemed filmmakers to talk about 2 things I love, Black people and music. Can't get any better than that. Describe myself right now. I am a brown-skinned Black woman. I'm wearing a gray shirt that actually features Diana Ross saying, "If you need me, call me," to make your documentary. I think I have a pink background and gray and a whole bunch of stuff on my on my shelves. So without further ado, I will introduce everyone to our panelists for today. I'm going to start with Melissa Hayslip. As a Peabody Award-winning Emmy-nominated producer, director, and writer, Melissa's work has been featured on Netflix, HBO Max, Peacock, CNN, PBS, and E! Her work responds to pressing social issues at the intersection of racial justice, social justice, activism, and representation. Melissa received the NAACP Image Awards and the 2020 Critics' Choice Award for her film Mr. Soul, which is streaming on Max, which is amazing, which premiered at Tribeca and was shortlisted for an Oscar. She's also been a co-executive producer of Ladies First, A Story of Women in Hip Hop, which is Netflix, and an executive producer of Black Pop, celebrating the power of Black culture on Peacock. Her film Satisfied, about actor and singer Renee Elise Goldsberry, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival this past weekend. Let's play a clip from Satisfied. That's so great. Next, we're moving on to the fabulous and esteemed Lisa Cortez. Emmy-winning director and producer, Lisa generates bold, explosive art that shines light on important stories hidden from view. Cortez launched her early career as a music executive at the iconic Def Jam label and Rush Artist Management. She also was VP of Artists and Repertoire at Mercury Records and founded the Loose Cannon label. As a filmmaker, she's directed and produced Little Richard, I Am Everything, which is everything, which had its world premiere at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival and was nominated for 26 awards, including a Grammy nomination for Best Film. Under Cortez Filmworks, Lisa has also directed and produced The Space Race for Nat Geo, and she's produced Invisible Beauty and The Apollo. Cortez also executive produced Precious, which was nominated for 6 Academy Awards and won 2. Lisa is a member of the documentary branch of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and the Directors Guild of America. She serves on the board of film at Lincoln Center, Independent Television Services, the Trajel Harrell Dance Company, Women Make Movies, and the DGA Focus on Women Committee. Let's play a clip from Little Richard, I Am Everything.
It's just like a shot of a cannon. His voice, my God, who is that? He created the rock and roll icon.
Sorry, y'all. It wasn't Elvis.
The first song that you love that your parents hate is the beginning of the soundtrack of your life.
Little Richard's lyrics were too lewd to get airplay on the radio.
It was not that dirty, it was just as clean as you were.
The South is the home of all things queer.
They called him a sissy, a punk.
I was not supposed to be the hero for their kids.
Little Richard has an incredible string of hits.
And so what they did was they said, we're going to put the white bucks on it.
Got a gal, her name's Sue. Knows just what to do.
Shut up!
The legacy of Little Richard is complex.
Did you know that Elvis Presley and Pat Boone sold more of Tutti Frutti than I did?
Little Richard was renouncing his queerness.
He didn't want to burn in hell. That's the way we were taught.
He was very, very good at liberating other people. He was not good at liberating himself.
Little Richard gave the world permission to be.
Ready, set, go, man, go! Long Uncle John with bald head Sally. He saw Aunt Mary coming and he ducked back in the alley. Michael was inspired by me. Prince, James Brown, I discovered him. Jimi Hendrix was my guitar player.
I used to stand on the desk and do Little Richard.
I love you, Paul. Hello, Linda.
Everyone was beholden to him.
He spit on every rule there was in music.
I was unpredictable. They didn't know what I was going to do. Now you got it, God gave it. Show it to the world.
My. That was great. And last but certainly not least, and the reason why most people are here today, is Mr. Stanley Nelson. He is the foremost chronicler of the African-American experience working in nonfiction film today. His documentary films, many of which have aired on PBS, combine compelling narratives with rich and deeply researched historical detail, shining new light on both familiar and underexplored aspects of the American past. A MacArthur Genius Fellow, Nelson was awarded a Peabody for his body of work in 2016. He has received numerous honors over the course of his career, including the 2016 Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Nelson's award-winning films include Miles Davis' Birth of the Cool, which offers a definitive look at the life and career of the iconic Miles Davis and premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2019, marking his 10th premiere at the prestigious festival, the most premieres of any documentary filmmaker. The film also won 2 Emmy Awards at the 42nd Annual News and Documentary Emmy Awards and was nominated for Best Music Film at the 62nd Grammy Awards. His latest music documentary, Make It Funky, The History of Funk, is forthcoming on PBS's Independent Lens. And this is an online exclusive. Let's play a clip from Stanley's upcoming film, Make It Funky, The History of Funk. We're all like bobbing our heads, which is always a good start to a panel on music documentaries, right? I want to start with Melissa just because I introduced her first, no particular order. Your Mr. Soul was interesting for you because obviously this was a family member, right? Tell me how you get involved in like research and, you know, become attached to someone like Renee, who has a whole different, you know, you're coming from a totally different vantage point.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me and thank you, Firelight, for this important discussion. Happy Juneteenth and happy Black Music Month. Well, as you said, Mr. Soul was a giant effort also about my uncle Ellis Hazlett, but also about Black music in the television show Soul from 1968 to 1973, which really was like the launching pad for Black music on television at that time nationwide, hosted by a Black host specifically. So that was an enormous amount of music for that. But getting involved with the Renee doc, which just premiered at Tribeca, was really interesting. I was brought onto that. They had already started. And coincidentally, I have had another career prior to filmmaking where I was in musical theater and had an extensive career on and off Broadway. So I loved musical theater and I loved acting and the music from musical theater. So when I heard about this project and I loved Hamilton, I said, oh, that's for me. But also because I loved the interplay of her being a Black woman trying to have it all, which is not just a universal question, but there's a lot of specificity through her eyes, seeing this story through the lens of Hamilton, but really foregrounding her story. What was interesting about this film project for me is it's a ton of music. It's also you're talking about music from a show that already exists that is ongoing, that's sort of a global phenomenon. So that presented a lot of challenges as well, making sure that we could get the permissions and all the rights and to talk to all the stakeholders in a Broadway show that is a current hit globally. So that was very challenging. Luckily, Renee Lee Scolsbury is beloved, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, his father, Luis Miranda, who owns the Keys to the Kingdom, Disney, Jeffrey Sellers, the public, the Broadway show, Adventureland, everyone came on board to say, yes, we support you. We support telling Renee's story, and we will allow you to explore this sort of iconic IP, which is Hamilton, through that lens. And so with their contributions and support, we were able to approach the project that way.
Wow, that's so interesting. And we'll get into some of the challenges with the clearances and everything later, but I just want to kind of frame a little bit of that question to Lisa too. I mean, can you talk about the myriad of ways of a film, featuring Black music icon might get kicked off? Like, is it better to go to the estate? Is it, to go to the label? What do you think is the best way today for filmmakers?
Hi, Leah. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be in conversation with all of you. When Little Richard passed away in the spring of 2020, immediately there was interest in the doc community to tell his story. And the issue that everyone encountered is that his estate was not settled. So in that case, we proceeded without having their buy-in because he had many brothers and sisters who still lived, and it was not easy to determine who was going to end up really controlling the estate. So what was important when we started the film was to make certain that the list of 10 essential songs that I created, that we could license them, and we could license them at a rate that we could afford. And once we were able to lock that in via our music supervisor, then we proceeded full speed ahead to make the film.
Do you think, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but if you hadn't been able to get those 10 songs, do you think you would have still tried to make the film?
No. I think to understand, Richard, the 360, perspective of him, and this sense of interiority and immersiveness that hopefully one experiences when they watch the film, the music is an essential part of defining him, but also of what remains and what has then been adapted by so many other influential artists. David Bowie, I would posit Lil Nas X, and a ton of others in between. You've got to hear the music. You got to feel the music. You need to, when he's performing, have everything in context to understand how radical he was and how important he was to this family tree.
That's amazing. Stanley, for Miles Davis, what was it like, securing the rights to some of his iconic compositions, I should say.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you so much. And it's great being here with all these great filmmakers and people whose films I've really admired. I think that with Miles, Miles was American Masters, and we met really early on with American Masters, Miles Davis's family that controlled the estate, and Sony, which controlled the music, and got them all in one room. And they kind of agreed. Miles's family agreed that they were gonna allow us to make the film, warts and all, and we're gonna kind of step in, and whatever rights they could give us, they would give us. Sony agreed to kind of a very, very reduced price. I should say that often, with the record companies, they see value in having a documentary film made, so that because of Lisa's film, a whole new generation is interested in Little Richard, and are streaming his music. So sometimes if you have a far-sighted record company, they'll kind of buy in, and so Sony, who owned probably 95% of Miles's music, bought in early. His family bought in, and we were able to make the film. I should say, in some difference with how Lisa made the film, they kept asking us for a list of songs, and we kept saying no. We're not going to. You can't give you a list of songs until the film is made, and we'll keep it down to, I think it was like 25 songs or something, but we cannot tell you what those songs are until we get a little further on. And luckily we were able to proceed like that.
Yeah, with Luther, same thing. Our list was ongoing, and there are probably a million songs we could have added and didn't. How important, Stanley, is it for you to have the family's buy-in? And what kind of role do they play going forward? Like, some of them want to be executive producers now, some of them want to have input, which can also be like a shaky road for filmmakers. Tell me your thoughts on that.
I think every film is different. Every film is a dance and a negotiation. Every film is different. I think that with Miles, and what I want is for the families to buy in and give me permission to make the film, and then leave me alone. Miles's family, we ended up great friends, and we still communicate, but they're hilarious when they tell the story, because I refuse to show them anything. And we got into Sundance, and I didn't send them the film until the night before, like at midnight on the night we were going to take the plane to Sundance, because I was going to Sundance. I was going. And so, basically, they saw the film, and they were in California, and he called me up at 3 a.m. crying, and Miles's nephew, who controls the rights, and he's crying, "I just love the film. I just love it." And his story is, I said, "Yeah, great, bye. I'll see you in Sundance."
It's always amazing to get the family crying. You feel like you've done something right,
Yeah, you want the family to like it, but I think that, and others can join in, but it's you don't want to get into the trap where you're going to say, "Oh yes, I know they're going to love it." So everything is hinging upon the families love it, because I just know they're going to love it. Well, you don't know what they're going to say. They might not love it. And you want to be able to still make your film and not change your film to please the family.
Melissa, for Mr. Soul, just kind of piggybacking off what we were talking about earlier, obviously you had access to your archive from your uncle's show, right? But obviously the performances, that's really what drove everything, and everything you put on there costs money. So what comes first? Does the story come first? Does the music come first? Does the footage archival come first for you? Can you explain that a bit?
Yes, absolutely. It was a massive undertaking because there were over 300 episodes of Soul between 1968 and 1973. And on the Soul series, the artists were performing live all the time. So on the one hand, that was good for us because that's not as an expensive license as if you're doing sync from a performance that they've already recorded. But you still have to license everything. And the hard part was understanding what was going to go in the film. And we had three storylines. Storyline A, meaning the story of Soul from 68 to 73. Storyline B was the story of Ellis Hayslip, how that and dropping in on those 5 years there. And then storyline C was the zeitgeist. Collapsing all those storylines into one helped us determine which performances will line up with all three of those storylines. So everything had to earn its way into the film, if that makes sense. And so we didn't have any gratuitous performances, even though we really loved so many. We had to choose the ones that worked with the whole story that we were telling. And then we had to approach each artist and go forward with an amazing music supervisor to figure out how we were going to license each song and for how long and whether we could or not. That was the challenging bit. We had over almost 70, 80 music cues in the film. We also had Robert Glasper, who you know, who was our composer, and he was able to, you know, help us stream together a beautiful soundtrack that also became a cinematic language, but musically for the film. And anything that we couldn't license, he could help recreate, which is great. And the themes that we were creating were part of that musical sort of sound bed that led all the way up to the song at the end, which is the one shortlisted for the Oscars for Best Original Song, with which he wrote with Layla Hathaway. And so every time we looked at the music, we treated music as a character in the film, much like the Stanley and Lisa, you have done the same, and you as well for Luther. And so the song and the music and the performance and how it was shot, what it meant to the culture, all of that influenced how it would be part of the storytelling. So it was really, really very hard because there's, you know, how do you choose between 2 or 10 Stevie Wonder songs? Like, we want all the Stevie Wonder songs, you know? So a lot of the editing was kind of like a Sophie's choice. And I remember somebody said to me, well, you're going to have to choose between Al Green and Stevie Wonder. And I just looked at them like, no, not possible. Not in my DNA.
Who could do that?
Not in any lifetime will I ever choose between Stevie and Al. So they both ended up in the film. We just had to be really mindful of how we were using them and how many times. By the way, they both got 2 songs.
Yes, yes. It was an amazing time, and they're both great in their own rights. I touched on a little bit of what you said, and I just want to direct this question to Lisa, especially with Little Richard. How do you understand the subject in the context of Blackness? You know, why is it important to you that you tell the story instead of a non-Black filmmaker, especially with somebody like Little Richard, who was kind of like in the backgrounds of mainstream America, some of their biggest hits, and in a way that I don't know if people knew before your film?
Well, I'm especially interested in our shadow histories. And for me, shadow histories are these figures who have done so much to move culture forward and have not been properly accredited. Whenever I start a project, I do numerous timelines. I do a biographical timeline for my character. I do a historical, cultural one. And what continuously happened is this Venn diagram kind of appeared very organically, where major shifts are happening and Little Richard is there. So what we oftentimes forget is in 1955, when Tutti Frutti comes out, it coincides with the birth of the teenager. The teenager is a post-World War II concept. It's fueled by these young people having autonomy, having a greater ability to express themselves, particularly with sexuality. Well, Little Richard is there adding accelerant. And so continuously, I kept seeing these moments that I knew were really important that then were being influential to these other artists who, you know, I think one-on-one to Richard would tell him how much he meant to them, but it wasn't widely known his impact. And so because I know this is a consistent narrative for Black people of adding the secret sauce, of starting the flame, I'm always looking for and making certain that in the stories that I tell, I can put that front and center and give the receipts that show you the vastness of our impact.
That's great. And the receipts part is so real and so necessary, because it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to see it, you know, because otherwise people may try to discount it and say it's not true, you know, and so that's super important. For Stanley, from the making of Miles, is there anything that you're now bringing into the Funk doc that you would want to do differently or the same, or any production ideas that have carried over?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, you know, the films are just so different. You know, Miles was really kind of biography of Miles Davis, you know, through the music. You know, Funk in some ways, you know, all films are hard. You know, I've never, you know, worked on an easy film, but Funk, you know, there's no story. You know, we're making it up as we go along. You know, and so it's a whole different, you know, ball of wax. One of the differences, I think one of the things that I, you know, when I was thinking about this, I wanted to talk about is, you know, there's a difference when you're making a film like about somebody like Miles, who's basically an instrumentalist, and you're making a film, you know, like Funk, where there's words that can kind of progress the movie on. So, you know, it's really difficult in some ways. You know, you can say that, you know, Miles, you know, that you get a mood from his music, you know, he's happy or he's sad, but it's not the same, you know. When Luther sings about something, you know, you can like use those words to tell his story. And so it becomes a little harder, and it also becomes a little harder to use as much music as you want to use. You know, and that's one of the things. When we started Miles, we really wanted to make sure that you heard Miles, you know, because we felt like so many times with music documentaries, you know, they talk around the music, but you don't really hear it. So we wanted to make sure that you kind of heard it.
That's great.
Can I jump in on that too?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Piggybacking on what Stanley was saying, and another layer for all of us, I'm sure, but specifically for Mr. Soul, was not just the performances and not just the music you're creating for the film, but the music that defined the era and the moments that defined the culture, as Lisa was saying. And so I was constantly picking what I knew were like the best moments, the best songs for the moments. Whether it was, you know, Backlash Blues, Nina Simone singing Backlash Blues as, you know, the Black resistance to the Vietnam War. And so we use that in a moment that was critical, speaking specifically to how Black people were responding to Vietnam and losing their sons and children to the war. But because it was part of the Black arts movement, we also knew those lyrics were from Langston Hughes. And so everything is like very layered that way. And so every song, whether you're licensing it for the film, creating it, or it's a performance, or it's something that, you know, is specifically performative, everything is very specific and dynamic. And those are the choices that you make, that you are committed to, and then you hope and pray that you can license.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's so true. And, even for like Luther, like so many people will be like, you didn't use creeping. I'm like, well, it didn't fit the narrative, like, I mean, if there was a place for creeping, it would have been in there, but and then also, of course, it plays into, do I have anything visually, or am I just playing an audio track, and I think you got to think of it. Let's talk about and this is just for anybody, and this is interesting. How do you balance between surveying, what the artist's fan bases would want to see versus the story that you may want to tell? Because I know, like with Luther, it's like, you wanna get it right, whatever that means, like in your mind and for the culture, so to speak. But then it may vary or differentiate from what you want to tell. Tell me how you kind of reconcile the two, and that could be for Lisa, Stanley, or Melissa.
Well, I think we need to provide the biographical beats, but then to give the context within where these moments happen and why we think this subject is worthy of 90 minutes of someone's time. In the case of Richard, I think, going back to this moment in 1955, where he is appearing on the scene and he has his pancake makeup and pompadour, it's the same year that Emmett Till is killed. So, and it was, as we worked on the film, I kept saying we cannot lose that juxtaposition, because the past is oftentimes a prelude to the moment we're in now. And I think some of the issues in this world is that people have a limited memory of the past, and they don't understand about sacrifice and progress and what it really looks like. And so that was just something, as when I'm telling these stories, is I want you to understand it just didn't happen. It happened because of this incredible gumbo coming together, and it is shaped by, nurture, and also by being in conversation with social change that's happening in the world, whether it's a conscious or a subconscious conversation that's taking place.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Stanley.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's something that you have to deal with, especially if you're doing kind of a biography. But sometimes, I mean, you just got to kind of bite the bullet, as a filmmaker, and just say, okay, somebody's going to say, well, how can you not, include blue and green if you're talking about Miles, and so you just have to bite the bullet, and sometimes. There's ways. So we knew we had to talk about Kind of Blue, Miles's, best-selling jazz album ever made. But what song we talked about, we felt like we had leeway there. So, that's kind of how we deal with it. But, sometimes it's just kind of funny. So we're thinking of funk because everybody has their favorite funk band, like I see somebody that say, oh, you're doing a film on funk? Well, you got to talk about Lakeside, well, what about Slave,
Right.
And we're thinking of starting the film with we're going to flash like 30 different names of funk bands and like, okay, we took care of it, Now
I also did want to say shout out to the amazing Louis Erskine. I mean, what he brought as we honor so much in this month. I want to just speak his name and your amazing collaboration with him.
Thank you so much. I'm trying not to tear up as I was talking about Miles. I was just thinking about how Louis was an incredible editor, and we started Miles. Louis and I hadn't worked together for a while. We kind of had gone different ways, and the first person I called was Louis and said, you got to do this, and what the film that we made, a lot of it was due to the fact that Louis Erskine was involved in the film. So thank you so much for that.
Wow. Yes, thank you. Let's turn to money for a second. How much say you're a young filmmaker and it wasn't a commissioned piece, can you make a film? Can you afford to make a film like Miles or like Little Richard or like Soul with the music involved? Is it possible?
Somebody else take that question.
Like what does it cost?
Looks ready to take it.
I'm going to take this one for the team, y'all, because this is a painful admission. Yes, you can do it, but you must be ready. You must acknowledge that, to be honest, like low key, for real, you can't do anything less than at 200 to 300,000 to start. I'm just going to be honest, especially if you are including performances and recordings from any artists, you know, the ones that are held and the publishing is held. Yeah, it's pretty expensive. There are ways around it, but we have to remember there are also unions to honor, there are artists to honor, and there are publishing deals to honor. And so you really have to be strategic when you're making the film, but you must think about that from the beginning so it's not a surprise at the end. It must be included in your budget and be a priority for the budget. And then if you can get an amazing music supervisor who has relationships with the publishing houses, who has done giant films with, you know, giant amounts of archival and music clearances, then they will already have relationships. And so when your music soup goes to them to ask, they already know that this is a reputable usage and that they can trust your usage of their beloved and iconic musical IP. So that is a real, I don't want to be discouraging, but it is fair to say.
Oh, it's real. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really also depends. I mean, you know, you can get lucky, so with Miles, again, 95% of his music was with Sony, and we could cut a deal with Sony and with the family, and we could cut a deal, and it was relatively inexpensive. We're doing a film now on Sun Ra, and Sun Ra's music is all owned by pretty much one person. So we've cut a deal with them. It really just depends. I mean, I don't think you want to, like if you're an independent filmmaker and you're just starting out, you don't want to say, okay, hey, wouldn't a film on Beyonce be great? Yeah, it would be great. You can't afford it.
But the other thing you also can do with the appropriate guidance is try to have an MFN. It's rare, most favored nations contract, so that if you can approach all the publishers with the same deal and then promise a step deal or a waterfall afterwards if the film benefits in the future, so that everyone can start out with the same. That can help you. Not everyone's going to agree to that, but those who do, that can help you mediate the amount of money that you're spending and try to budget accordingly.
And just describe what an MFN really is quickly for those who may not know.
Sure. Yeah. MFN stands for, I beg your pardon, most favored nations, which is just by saying that everybody will have the same terms. So this artist, if you're licensing from their publishing, the price will be the same as licensing from this publishing. But the thing is, all the publishers have to get on board with that. So you have to approach them all at the same time and say, this is what we're doing. We're offering, $2,500 per side. Do you agree with that? And if you do, here's the waterfall that will happen after that. Once the film makes $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, there'll be a waterfall effect and everyone will receive the same amount after that. It's basically just, it's like rent control. It's putting a ceiling on what the cost will be. Of course, that's the tricky part, is making sure that everyone is all in and that they will support your film, understand what your budget is, and try to help you by, one person's not charging $8,000, another person's charging $10,000, but everyone's starting at the same amount. It can work.
And just to clear it up, when you said the 200K earlier, you just meant for music alone, correct?
That was music alone, yes.
Yes, okay, just wanted to make sure. Lisa, go ahead.
Well, one thing I wanted to share too is that, with all of our films, we also have worked with some incredible composers, so it's not wall to wall, Little Richard. I was really excited to work with Tamar Kali Brown for that score. I worked with Robert Glasper on the score for the Apollo, Yonique Bontemps for the space race. So these incredible Black composers who have such a broad musical vocabulary are also helpful for scenes that you don't necessarily want to reference, Miles or Richard or Luther. I mean, you guys worked, I believe, with Robert Glasper for Luther also. And so there's something that, the composers can bring to add to the musical texture that really supplements it. So it's not just wall-to-wall music by this one artist. And I think that's something that we don't oftentimes think about, the role of the score and the composer and the musicality that they have in their toolbox, and how we as filmmakers are able to use that to broaden the storytelling.
100%. And just go ahead, Stanley.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to add, you probably do well to find a good fair use lawyer also.
Mm-hmm.
Save yourself
Definitely.
some
Definitely.
fair use.
And
we did a film on Obama, and we had a scene where Obama and Michelle are dancing to "At Last" by
Etta James.
yeah, I think actually it was another version, but anyway, they're dancing to it, and the fair use lawyer said, if somebody just said, when they were dancing to "At Last," and when the night he was elected, you could fair use it. So we got somebody to say that. It's free.
Yeah, that's great advice. The lawyers can definitely help you to pivot or cut down or make things. I know with Luther, we had a longer scene with Bette Midler, and we ended up cutting it from like a minute to like 13 seconds, but we didn't have to pay for it. So it was worth it.
I think just to be clear, I think actually it was Beyonce's version of it.
Okay.
And that's why we knew we couldn't buy it.
Yeah, if it's Beyonce, wipe that $200K budget out of your mind.
I should also, also like, hip hop and the modern artists are like it's its own thing, and you want to avoid them whenever possible.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that just for a second? I'm just curious. Can you expand?
Yeah.
Stanley, you want to take it?
We used Kendrick Lamar. We're Gonna Be All Right.
Oh yeah.
And there was no other song that would do it in the HBCU film, and they wanted $30,000.
There's also another component with a lot of hip hop music, is that oftentimes the artist is not the sole writer. So they might have looped a drum line from Funky Drummer. They might have taken a woo from another place. And so, due to the complexity of how these songs are crafted with both organic, natural instrumentation, but also sampling, when you look at some of our favorite songs and you look at the credits and you go, why is Sam Cooke credited? Sam Cooke's been dead a long time. Well, it's because they sampled, maybe they took a melody line, maybe they took a vocal, and when the song was cleared, they had to give a portion of those rights to the artists who were involved. And that sometimes adds a complexity, because sometimes the estate wants more for their portion in that song. So that's where it can get additionally get complicated.
That's a great point. Go ahead, Stanley. Yeah.
We used a piece in Sound of the Police. I think it was Ice Cube, and Ice Cube people didn't even know what he used. I mean, they were like, we don't know, there's a lot of stuff. There's actually a website that tells you all the underlying songs that are in any hip hop track. But the problem is that they'll tell you all the underlying songs that are in the whole cut. And if you're using 20 seconds of the cut, 3/4 of that stuff might not be in that 30 seconds. but that's all they can tell you. And so we had this whole, got into this whole thing with Universal Music, where they would only give us what they call a quit claim rights, which means that they'll give you the rights, but if anybody sues you, you're in trouble, so it's like, doesn't do you a lot of good.
Yeah, and specifically with hip hop, we ran into that even with the Satisfied film, because even though Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote the music, most if not all the music for Hamilton, and we are using some songs that Renee is singing in the musical, which is then live captured on Disney, and some from the performances at the Public and such, we had to deal with the fact that when he said, you can have these songs, but you can't have the other songs, because as you know, Hamilton is based on and influenced by hip hop. And so a lot of the songs that he wrote actually have sort of references and musical samples in his writing style that he's acknowledged the provenance is from hip hop. And so we were like, wow, okay. So we only had certain songs that we could use for Renee that she sang that didn't have any of those hip hop references. We had the same issue with my series on Netflix, which is called Ladies First, a story of women in hip hop, where, we want to celebrate all of these women in hip hop, but we're realizing, a lot of times in the beginning, they were features on other on rap songs from, their crew or whatever.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a minefield as well. So it's always with hip hop, it's always collaborative, and some songs are just completely off limits. For another film I did called Contact High, we wanted to use the 10 Crack Commandments, but didn't realize that, Public Enemy was actually in a lawsuit at the moment with Biggie, who is deceased, because Public Enemy didn't like that he had used the countdown, but that it was referencing crack, and Public Enemy was all about, doing good by the community. So, but we really needed that countdown to start the film. So what we did was we licensed the original song from Public Enemy, the countdown, and then, took away the part that was written by Biggie. So there's always a little sort of jujitsu that you have to do, and you need lawyers and really, really great music soups to help you kind of navigate who owns what and who will give you the least resistance and the most help.
And this is such a great discussion, and we're running out of time. So I do want to get to a couple of audience questions. And the first one actually comes from Jessica, which is kind of on the same track that we're on now. What is the best way to pivot if a key piece of music you want is not clearable or prohibitively expensive?
Get something else.
But like you said, with the Kendrick Lamar one, that's what you wanted.
Yeah, we paid.
Well, I think
I'm embarrassed to say it even, but it was the last piece and we had it in the budget and we just paid it.
Well, I think you have to use everything you have, sometimes the personal letter to the estate or whomever, or to the artist and the artist manager. You can sometimes see if they have done a re-record. Oftentimes artists do that. I know Public Enemy has, with a lot of their classic material that was on Def Jam, they re-recorded it. So it's sometimes easier to access and license those materials. But what we do, we have to kill a lot of our darlings. But I think as filmmakers, we are able to replace it with score, a sound alike, or, just find another way to be of service to the scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Lisa is really great here. The other thing, these people are human beings. So if you can get to them, sometimes they have the right to just sign it. Okay, fine, yeah, you can use my song. But you've got to kind of be able to get to them. So they are human beings. Try to do everything you possibly can to get the rights and before you replace it, because it feels crucial to your film, and maybe it is.
And sometimes you can actually offer a clip to show the scene in which the music will be used, with a description of the larger sequence and the meaning of that clip and the meaning of the song to the clip. And if you can provide like a really great case saying, we can't make this film without it. We absolutely must, and this is why, and here's who's supporting it. You can show your case and see if they might understand the significance of what it would mean to you if you could use the music, and what it would mean to you if you couldn't. That there's humanity in that as well.
There is. Speaking of humanity, this is our last question from Soraya. I understand the glamour of the music business and celebrity sales, but how do you strike that balance with the more nuanced human stories around the characters featured behind the music? Lisa, thoughts?
Well, I think what was really important for me with not only Richard, but so many of the films I've made is I want to give my subjects the agency to tell their story. And to understand in his case, that if he made statements that were not correct, because he wasn't always the most reliable narrator, that it was then that I brought my incredible scholars in to correct and to provide context. But it is always important for me with these shadow histories and bringing them into the light to restore that sense of the individual to narrate their story, even if they're no longer alive, because I do think a big part of what we do is ancestor work. And there is a lot of healing and empowerment that happens through the stories we tell.
I love ancestor work. Go ahead, Stanley.
I think that, what we did with Miles was the first time we went into meeting with the family, we said we want to make the film warts and all. And Miles had written an autobiography where he talked about his drug use. He talked about his abuse of women. We said it's already out there. We can't make the film and whitewash it and pretend like it's not there. So we're going to go there. And they respected that and bought into it.
One last quick question for me. Any legends, Black music legends out there just begging for a future feature film? I know Lisa and I, we recently talked about one, but I won't say what it is, but it's Stanley, Melissa, Lisa, anybody?
Yeah, Stevie Wonder.
I was going to say Stevie
Wonder. I think everybody collectively wants that.
I actually asked about that. I was digging around a little bit, but I was told that he wants to get his book out first. And so then the film could be based on the book. So we'll see.
Marvin Gaye is another one of mine that I've always wanted to do. But this has been amazing to be with all of you all and just the insight. I think people got such valuable information from this brief discussion. I really wish we could go on for another hour. I mean, there's so much more to talk about in the music space, but thank you so much for being here with us. And congrats on your new films. I mean, I can't wait to see Funk. And I know Lisa has always got some stuff percolating. I don't know what's next. I'm excited to see and satisfy Melissa as well. And if you haven't seen any of their films, most of them are streaming, so you can see them. So I just want to thank everybody from offering insightful, practical information on making music docs. I hope you learn something new, and hopefully everybody will create a nuanced portrait of your own Black music icons. And that's all for me.